The chamber of the Galactic Council stretched upward like the inside of a hollow mountain. Its walls lined with floating platforms where representatives from 100 different species watched and waited. And Ambassador Daniel Shaw stood alone on the speaking floor. Feeling very small beneath their alien gazes, he had traveled for 3 months to reach Valoran Prime, the neutral station where the Council gathered to decide the fate of worlds, and now that he was here, he could feel the weight of 8 billion human lives pressing down on his shoulders. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Daniel began, his voice steady despite the fear in his chest. I come before you today not to ask for charity or favors, but to warn you of a threat that approaches our region of space. He activated the holographic display behind him, and a swarm of red dots appeared, moving slowly but steadily toward a small blue marker that represented Earth. Our long-range sensors detected this formation 6 months ago, Daniel continued. And after extensive analysis, we have confirmed what many of you already know. These are Vex harvesters, and they are heading directly for our home world. A murmur rippled through the chamber, but it was not a sound of concern or sympathy. It was the sound of amusement. High Speaker Zolmith, a towering figure with silver skin and 4 arms, leaned forward from his elevated seat at the center of the chamber and spoke in a voice that echoed off the walls. Ambassador Shaw, the Council is aware of the Vex migration patterns, and we have monitored this particular swarm for some time, Zolmith said, his tone carrying a note of boredom. What exactly are you requesting from this body? Daniel straightened his spine and spoke clearly. We request military assistance and access to defensive technologies that can help us repel this invasion. And we are prepared to offer whatever terms the Council considers fair in exchange for this aid. The laughter started from somewhere on the upper platforms and spread quickly through the chamber like a disease. And Daniel felt his face grow hot as hundreds of alien voices joined in the mockery. Counselor Brethan of the Kalori Dominion rose from his seat. His reptilian features twisted into what Daniel had learned to recognize as contempt, and his voice cut through the fading laughter like a blade. The human ambassador asks us for our weapons, Brethan said, spreading his clawed hands wide. This primitive species that only discovered faster than light travel a mere century ago now wants the Council to arm them against a force they cannot possibly understand. With respect, Counselor, Daniel replied, keeping his voice calm. We understand perfectly well what the Vex will do to our planet if they reach it. They will harvest every living thing on Earth, from the largest whale to the smallest bacterium, and they will leave nothing but a dead rock behind. Vretham waved a dismissive hand and continued as if Daniel had not spoken. Perhaps the humans should consider a more practical solution. Evacuate your population to other worlds. Accept refugee status among the civilized species of this galaxy. And let the Vex have your little planet. Earth is our home, Daniel said, his voice hardening. We will not abandon it. Then you will die with it, Vretham replied simply. And he sat back down as if the matter was settled. Daniel turned to face the full Council, looking from one platform to another, searching for any sign of support or sympathy. But he found only indifference and amusement in the eyes that stared back at him. I ask you to consider the strategic implications, Daniel pressed on, refusing to give up. The Vex do not stop after one world. They consume and move on. Always hungry, always expanding if they take Earth. They will grow stronger, and eventually they will threaten worlds that this Council does care about. High Speaker Zolmith raised one of his 4 hands to silence the murmuring that followed Daniel's words. And when he spoke, his voice was final. Ambassador Shaw, the Council has reviewed your petition, and we have reached our decision, Zolmith announced. Earth's request for military assistance is denied, and furthermore, we must inform you that sharing advanced defensive technologies with pre-development species is Against our founding charter? Pre-development? Daniel repeated, the word bitter in his mouth. Your species is young. Ambassador too young to participate in galactic affairs as equals, Zolmeth explained. His tone almost gentle, as if he were speaking to a child. Perhaps in another 1,000 years, if humanity survives. We will revisit this conversation. In another 1,000 years. There may be no humanity left to have this conversation with, Daniel said, quiet Livereth, and laughed again. A harsh sound that grated against Daniel's ears. Then that would be a natural outcome, would it not? The galaxy is harsh. Ambassador species rise and fall all the time. Yours would hardly be the first to vanish. And it certainly will not be the last. Daniel stood in silence for a long moment, feeling the eyes of the council upon him, feeling their dismissal and their contempt. And something changed inside him in that moment, something hardened. I want to make sure I understand correctly, Daniel said. His voice now cold and measured. Earth faces extinction. And the Galactic Council's official response is to mock us and suggest we abandon our home world. The Council's response is to acknowledge that Earth's survival is not a galactic concern, Zolmeth replied. You may remain on Valoran Prime as a registered observer species. But this matter is closed. Daniel nodded slowly, and when he spoke again, his words carried across the silent chamber with perfect clarity. Then I have nothing more to say to this council. But I want every representative here to remember this moment, Daniel said, looking up at the platform surrounding him. Remember that when humanity asked for help, you laughed at us. Remember that when we faced annihilation, you turned away, because one day, and that day may come sooner than you think, humanity will remember too. He turned and walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence, and just before he reached the door, Rethan called out one final taunt. Go home and make your peace with your gods. Human, you will be meeting them soon enough. Daniel paused at the threshold, but did not turn around. And his response was quiet, but somehow carried to every ear in the chamber. We shall see. Counselor, we shall see. And then he was gone. And the council returned to its other business, already forgetting about the small blue world and the desperate man who had come so far to plead for its survival. But the galaxy would not forget for long. The unified command center beneath Geneva buzzed with activity as officers from every nation on Earth worked side by side, their differences forgotten in the face of extinction. And Admiral Lara Kim stood at the central holographic display, studying the approaching swarm with cold calculation. How long do we have? She asked without looking up. Colonel Marcus Webb checked his datapad and replied, at their current speed, the Vex will reach the outer edge of our solar system in approximately 4 months. Admiral, 4 months to prepare for a force that had devoured hundreds of worlds. 4 months to build defenses against an enemy that had never been defeated. 4 months to do what the entire Galactic Council believed was impossible. Laura had faced difficult odds before, but nothing like this. The door behind her opened, and Secretary General Michelle Torres entered the room, flanked by 2 aides and followed by a thin man in a white lab coat who carried himself with nervous energy. Admiral Kim, this is Dr. Kevin Morris from the Geneva Research Institute, Michelle said. He has something important to show us. Lavra turned to face the scientist, noting the dark circles under his eyes and the slight tremor in his hands. This was a man who had not slept in days. What do you have for me, Doctor? Kevin stepped forward and placed a small device on the holographic table. And when he activated it, a complex schematic appeared in the air. 37 years ago, a vessel of unknown origin crashed in the Pacific Ocean. Kevin began, speaking quickly. The governments of the world kept it secret, studied it, and eventually gave up trying to understand its technology. But I never gave up. Lavra exchanged a glance with Michelle before asking, what kind of vessel? We never identified the species that built it, but their weapons technology was centuries ahead of anything we had seen, Kevin explained, his eyes bright with excitement despite his exhaustion. I've spent my entire career trying to reverse engineer their primary weapon system. And 6 months ago, I finally succeeded. He manipulated the holographic display, and the schematic transformed into a simulation showing a wave of energy, spreading outward from a central point. I call it the resonance array. Kevin continued. It generates a specific frequency that disrupts biological neural networks against humans. It causes mild disorientation, but against the Vex, whose entire civilization depends on a shared hive-mind connection, it should be devastating. Laura felt something she had not felt since receiving news of the Council's rejection hope. Should be? She repeated. You are not certain it will work? Kevin shook his head. I have never had a Vex to test it on. Admiral, but based on everything we know about their biology and communication methods, the effect should sever their connection to the hive mind temporarily, leaving each individual unit confused and unable to coordinate. How long would this effect last? Minutes at most, but in battle, minutes can be the difference between victory and defeat. Laura nodded slowly and turned to Michelle. Can we build enough of these arrays to cover our defense perimeter? Michelle's expression was grave but determined. It will require every manufacturing facility on Earth working around the clock. But yes, we can do it. The question is whether our people are willing to make that sacrifice. Then we need to tell them the truth. Laura said, all of it. 3 days later, Secretary General Michelle Torres appeared on every screen on Earth. Her face calm and her voice steady as she delivered the most important speech in human history. My fellow humans, I speak to you today with honesty and with respect, because you deserve nothing less. Michelle began. An alien force known as the Vex is approaching our world, and they intend to destroy all life on this planet. She paused to let the weight of her words sink in before continuing. 1 week ago, our ambassador asked the Galactic Council for help, and they refused. They laughed at us and told us to abandon our home, to scatter among the stars as refugees, to accept that humanity's time was over. Her eyes hardened, and her voice grew stronger. I am here to tell you that we will do no such thing. Earth is our home, the only home we have ever known, and we will defend it with everything we have. She outlined the threat, explained the plan, and called for volunteers to join the defense forces. And by the end of that day, recruitment centers around the world were overwhelmed with people ready to fight in the orbital shipyards around Mars. Captain Nathan Cole supervised the final preparations of his carrier group, watching as workers loaded weapons and supplies onto the Endurance with desperate efficiency. His first officer, Commander Patricia Hayes, approached with a data pad in her hands. Captain, we have received our deployment orders. We are to take position at the outer perimeter and serve as the vanguard against the Vex. Approach. Nathan took the pad and reviewed the orders. Knowing exactly what they meant, his ships would be the first to engage the enemy, the first to face the full horror of the swarm, and likely the first to die. Have the crew been informed? He asked quietly. Yes, sir, not a single person has requested a transfer. Nathan felt a swell of pride in his chest as he looked out at his ship and the hundreds of men and women who had chosen to stand with him. Then let us give them something to be proud of, he said. We may be the vanguard, but we will not be a sacrifice. We are going to hurt these things in ways they have never been hurt before. And we are going to show the entire galaxy what humans are made of. Patricia saluted sharply. Yes, sir. As the days passed and the Vex drew closer, humanity worked with a unity it had never known before. Factories running day and night. Scientists sharing discoveries across borders without hesitation. Soldiers training alongside former enemies who were now brothers and sisters in arms. And in her command center beneath Geneva, Admiral Lara Kim watched the preparations unfold and allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. The galaxy had written humanity off as a dead species walking. But the galaxy was about to learn a very important lesson about the stubborn, defiant, endlessly surprising creatures called humans. They did not know how to give up. The void of space beyond the Kuiper Belt had never seemed so dark. And Captain Nathan Cole stood on the bridge of the Endurance, watching his tactical display fill with more red dots than he could count. Contact confirmed. Captain, Lieutenant Amanda Price reported from her station, her voice tight with controlled fear. Vex Swarm is entering weapons range in approximately 15 minutes. I am reading over 12,000 individual vessels. 12,000 against humanity's fleet of 300 ships. The mathematics were simple and brutal. Nathan opened a channel to his entire carrier group and spoke with a calm he did not entirely feel. All ships. This is Captain Cole. We knew this moment was coming, and we prepared for it as best we could. Remember your training. Watch out for each other and make every shot count. He paused and then added, today we fight not just for ourselves, but for everyone we left behind on Earth, our families, our friends. Our entire species is counting on us to buy them time. Let us show these monsters what that means to a human being. The channel filled with acknowledgments, voices from dozens of ships speaking as one, and then the Vex were upon them. The first wave hit like a physical blow. Hundreds of organic-looking vessels swarming around the human formation, firing streams of corrosive projectiles that ate through hull armor like acid. Through paper, Nathan watched in horror as two frigates on his starboard side simply dissolved under the assault, their crews having no time to evacuate before the ships broke apart. Return fire, all batteries, he ordered, and the Endurance shuddered as her weapon systems came alive. Human railguns and missiles tore into the Vex swarm. And for every human ship that fell, dozens of Vex vessels were destroyed. But there were always more. Always another wave rising to replace the fallen. They are adapting to our attack patterns, Amanda reported, her fingers flying across her console. Every time we establish an effective tactic, they shift their formation to counter it within minutes. Nathan gritted his teeth and watched the battle unfold, searching for any weakness, any pattern that might give them an edge. The Vex moved like a single organism, each ship responding instantly to the movements of the others. And Nathan realized that this was the hive mind at work, 10,000 ships with one guiding intelligence. But as he watched, he noticed something strange. Certain ships seemed to glow slightly brighter than the others, and the movements of nearby vessels always oriented around these brighter points. Lieutenant Price, focus sensors on those luminous vessels in Sector 7, Nathan ordered. Pointing at his display, Amanda complied, and her eyes widened as the data came in. Captain, those vessels are emitting a distinct signal pattern. It looks like they are relay points for the hive mind communication network. Node ships, Nathan breathed, understanding flooding through him. They are the connection points that keep the swarm coordinated. If we take them out, we might be able to disrupt their unity. He immediately opened a channel to Admiral Kim back at the Mars Command Center. Admiral, we have identified potential weak points in the Vex formation relay vessels that seem to coordinate local swarm behavior, requesting permission to concentrate fire on these targets. Laura's voice came back steady and clear. Permission granted. Captain, show us what you have found. Nathan turned to his tactical officer. Coordinate with all remaining ships. I want every weapon we have focused on those node vessels. Ignore everything else and hit those targets with everything we have got. The human fleet reformed around this new strategy, ignoring the swarm of smaller Vex ships that clawed at their hulls and focusing all their firepower on the glowing relay points. The first node ship exploded under concentrated railgun fire, and the effect was immediate. Dozens of Vex vessels in its vicinity suddenly stopped moving in coordination. Crashing into each other or drifting aimlessly, it is working. Amanda shouted, unable to contain her excitement. Local Vex units are losing cohesion. But the victory was short-lived, as the hive mind adapted once again, pulling its node ships deeper into the swarm, where they were harder to target. And the Vex assault resumed with renewed fury. The battle raged for hours. And humanity paid a terrible price for every small victory. Ship after ship fell to the relentless swarm, crews fighting until the very end, refusing to surrender even when their vessels were torn apart around them. Nathan felt the endurance shudder as another impact rocked the ship, and damage reports flooded in from every section. Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7, main reactor operating at 60%. "We have lost contact with the port flight deck," his executive officer reported grimly, and still the Vex came. Wave after wave, an endless tide of death. Then something unexpected happened. A transmission cut through the chaos of battle, broadcast on all frequencies, and the voice that spoke was not human. "Humans of Earth," the voice said, cold and emotionless, and somehow speaking in every language simultaneously. "This is the Vex Collective. Your resistance is noted but irrelevant. Surrender. Your biomass and your end will be quick. Continue to fight, and we will harvest your world slowly, painfully, making your species suffer for every moment of delay." Nathan stared at his communication console in shock. The Vex did not negotiate, did not speak, did not acknowledge their prey as anything more than food. And yet here they were, addressing humanity directly. Admiral Kim's response came seconds later, broadcast across the human fleet and beyond. "This is Admiral Lara Kim of United Earth Defense Force. Humanity does not surrender. Not today. Not ever. You will have to take our world from our cold, dead hands." The Vex response was simple and terrifying. "That is acceptable." The swarm surged forward with renewed aggression, and Nathan knew they could not hold. "All ships, fall back to the Mars defense line," Admiral Kim ordered. "We have learned what we needed to learn. Now we prepare for the real battle." Nathan gave the order to retreat, and what remained of the Vanguard fleet limped back toward the inner solar system, leaving behind the wreckage of 100 ships and thousands of brave souls. But they had not died for nothing. They had found a weakness, proved the Vex could be hurt, and somewhere in the dark spaces between stars, hidden observer vessels from a dozen alien species transmitted footage of the battle back to their governments. The galaxy was watching, and for the first time, they were not laughing. The Vex swarm descended upon Mars like a plague of locusts, darkening the stars with their numbers. And Admiral Lara Kim watched from the command center of Olympus Station as the enemy approached the final line of human defense. "All resonance array stations report ready," Colonel Marcus Webb announced. "Dr. Morris confirms the system is fully operational and awaiting your command." Lara nodded but did not speak, her eyes fixed on the tactical display showing the swarm's advance. They had lost over half their fleet in the outer system engagement, and what remained was battered and exhausted. But every surviving ship was in position, every weapon loaded, every crew ready to fight. This was it, humanity's last stand. "Captain Cole, what is your status?" Lara asked over the command channel. Nathan's voice came back rough with fatigue, but steady. "The Endurance is holding together with prayers and welding tape, Admiral. But we are still in the fight. My crew is ready." "Good. I need you to lead the assault group. When we activate the arrays, the Vex will be confused and vulnerable. But only for a short time. You need to hit their node ships hard and fast before they can recover." "Understood. Admiral, we will not let you down." Lara turned to Dr. Kevin Morris, who stood at a separate console, his hands hovering over the activation controls. And the scientist looked pale and frightened, but determined. "Doctor, are you ready?" Kevin swallowed hard and nodded. The arrays are linked and calibrated when you give the word. We will broadcast the resonance frequency across the entire defense perimeter. But Admiral, I have to warn you, I still do not know exactly how the Vex will react. This could save us. Or it could make them very, very angry. They are already trying to eat our planet. Doctor, I am not sure how much angrier they can get. Kevin managed a weak smile at that. And Laura turned back to the tactical display as the first Vex ships entered weapons range. All defensive platforms. Open fire! The space around Mars erupted in light and violence as orbital defense stations unleashed everything they had. Missiles and energy beams and railgun rounds tearing into the advancing swarm. And for a moment, it seemed like the wall of fire might actually stop them, but the Vex pushed through, absorbing losses that would have broken any other fleet. Their collective mind driving them forward with single-minded hunger. They are breaking through the outer perimeter. Marcus reported, his voice tight. Defense platforms Alpha 7 through Alpha 12 are gone. Hold the line as long as possible, Lavra ordered. We need them deeper into the array coverage zone. The battle raged on, and humanity paid in blood for every kilometer of space they defended. Ships and stations falling one after another as the swarm advanced. But they did not break, did not retreat, did not give a single inch more than they had to in the bridge of the Endurance. Nathan watched his damage display turn increasingly red as his ship took hit after hit. But he held position, waiting for the signal. Captain, we have lost main weapons on the port side, Patricia reported. Engineering says we have maybe 20 minutes before the reactor goes critical. Ma'am, we had better make those 20 minutes count, Nathan replied. His jaw set finally. Lavra saw what she had been waiting for. The main body of the Vex swarm had pushed past the outer defenses and into the heart of the array network. Their node ships clearly visible among the masses of smaller vessels. Now, Doctor, activate the arrays. Kevin's hands flew across his console and across the Mars defense perimeter. Hidden satellites and platforms came to life, broadcasting a frequency that human ears could not hear but Vex minds could not ignore. The effect was instantaneous and spectacular. The swarm that had moved with such perfect coordination suddenly dissolved into chaos. Ships colliding with each other, firing randomly, spinning without purpose as the hive mind connection that bound them together shattered. Nathan watched in amazement as a Vex cruiser directly ahead of him simply stopped moving, its organic hull twitching and pulsing as if in pain. All ships, attack! Lavra commanded. Hit the node ships now, while they are vulnerable. The human fleet surged forward, and Nathan led the charge, pushing the damaged Endurance to her limits as they dove into the confused swarm. Target that node ship at bearing 275, he ordered. Everything we have got. Fire! The Endurance's remaining weapons blazed, and the node ship crumpled under the assault, its destruction sending ripples of further confusion through the nearby Vex hull across the battlefield. Human ships repeated the same tactic, identifying and destroying node ships while the swarm floundered in disarray. But the Vex were not defeated yet, even without coordination. Individual ships were still dangerous, and they began to recover faster than anyone had hoped. The effect is wearing off, Kevin reported urgently. They are adapting to the frequency. I can try to modulate it, but I do not know how long I can stay ahead of them. Do whatever you have to do, Lavra replied. We need more time. Nathan saw his opportunity. A cluster of node ships had gathered together, apparently trying to re-establish the hive mind connection, and if he could destroy them all at once, it might cripple the swarm permanently. All ships in assault group, form up on me, he ordered. We are going in. Patricia grabbed his arm. Captain, the Endurance cannot survive another direct engagement. The reactor is already failing. Nathan looked at his first officer, at the woman who had served beside him for 15 years, and he saw understanding in her eyes. Get the crew to the escape pods. Commander, that is an order. Sir, Patricia. Those node ships are our best chance to end this. I am not asking you to die with me, but I am going to finish this fight. Patricia held his gaze for a long moment, then saluted sharply. It has been an honor. Captain, as the crew evacuated, Nathan pushed the Endurance forward, gathering speed, aiming directly at the cluster of node ships as the Vex began to recover and turn their weapons toward him. This is Captain Nathan Cole to all human forces, he broadcast, his voice calm and clear. It has been a privilege to serve with you. Tell Earth we did not go quietly. He pushed the reactor into overload and drove the Endurance into the heart of the node ship cluster. The explosion was visible from Mars itself. A brilliant flash that consumed not just the Endurance, but the entire cluster of node ships. And the effect on the Vex swarm was catastrophic without their primary coordination network. The hive mind collapsed entirely, and 10,000 Vex ships suddenly became 10,000 mindless drones, crashing into each other, drifting aimlessly. Easy targets for the human fleet. Laura watched the tactical display transform from desperate red to triumphant green as the swarm disintegrated. All ships, press the attack, she ordered, her voice thick with emotion. Do not let a single one of them escape. For the first time in recorded history, the Vex retreated, the remnants of their swarm fleeing into deep space, pursued by human ships that showed them the same mercy they had shown to 100 devoured worlds. None at all. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire, carried by trader ships and diplomatic couriers and the countless hidden observers who had watched humanity's desperate stand against the Vex swarm. A primitive species from a backwater world had done what no civilization in 10,000 years had accomplished. They had broken the Vex, shattered their hive mind, sent them fleeing in terror, and they had done it alone, without help. After the Galactic Council had laughed at their pleas on 100 worlds, beings of every shape and size watched footage of human soldiers fighting hand-to-hand against Vex drones when their weapons failed, of pilots ramming their damaged ships into enemy vessels rather than retreat, of a captain named Nathan Cole driving his dying carrier into the heart of the enemy fleet and becoming a legend. The council chambers on Valoran Prime were very quiet when Ambassador Daniel Shaw returned, walking the same path he had walked 4 months earlier. But this time, he did not come as a supplicant. Admiral Lara Kim walked beside him in her dress uniform, her chest covered with medals she had never wanted to earn. And behind them came a delegation of human officers and diplomats who held their heads. High Speaker Zolmuth watched them approach with an expression that might have been discomfort. And Councilor Vrethon sat in his usual place, but his scales had taken on a paler shade that Daniel had learned indicated fear. Ambassador Shaw, Zolmuth began, his voice carefully neutral. The Council welcomes humanity back to these chambers and extends our congratulations on your remarkable. I did not come here for congratulations, Daniel interrupted, his voice cold. I came here to deliver a message. The chamber fell silent. Dozens of alien species watching the small human who stood at the center of the speaking floor and spoke to the most powerful beings in the galaxy as if they were children. 4 months ago, I stood in this exact spot and begged you for help, Daniel continued. I showed you evidence of what was coming. I explained what was at stake. And you laughed at me. You called my people primitive, suggested we abandon our home, told us that our survival was not a galactic concern. He paused and looked around the chamber, meeting alien eyes without flinching. We survived anyway, not because of your help, but in spite of your indifference. Human men and women gave their lives to protect our world. And they did it knowing that the great civilizations of this galaxy had already written us off as dead. Vrethon shifted uncomfortably in his seat, and when he spoke, his voice lacked its previous arrogance. Ambassador, The Council acknowledges that our initial assessment of your species may have been incomplete in light of recent events. We would like to propose a formal alliance between Earth and the member worlds of the Galactic Council, including full technology sharing and mutual defense agreements. Daniel laughed. A short, harsh sound that echoed off the chamber walls. You want to be our allies now? After you refused to lift a finger while the Vex approached our world? After you told us to accept extinction gracefully? He shook his head slowly. No. Counselor Humanity will choose its own allies, and we will choose them from among those who did not mock us in our hour of need. He turned to address the wider chamber, raising his voice so that every representative could hear. To the smaller nations of this galaxy, the ones the Council ignores and dismisses just as they dismissed us, humanity, extends an open hand. We know what it is like to stand alone, and we will not forget that feeling. Any world that wishes to stand with us need only ask, and we will answer. A murmur ran through the chamber as representatives from dozens of lesser species exchanged glances, and Daniel could see hope kindling in eyes that had known only resignation. Smith leaned forward, his four hands gripping the arms of his chair. Ambassador Shaw, you are making a serious mistake. The Council has maintained peace in this galaxy for millennia, and challenging our authority will have consequences. Lavra stepped forward, speaking for the first time, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had faced down a Vex swarm and won. We are not challenging anyone. High Speaker, we are simply choosing our own path. Humanity has learned that the only protection we can truly rely on is the protection we provide for ourselves. She paused and looked directly at Vrethan. But I will say this, the Vex were probing other systems before they turned toward Earth. We found records in their command vessels showing future targets, and many of those targets were Council worlds. So while you were laughing at our ambassador, the Vex were already planning your destruction. The chamber erupted in alarmed conversations, and Vrethan's scales went even paler. You knew this and did not warn us? He demanded. I'm warning you now, Laura replied calmly. The Vex are not destroyed, only scattered. They will regroup. They will return. And next time, they might choose a target that does not fight back as hard as we did. She let that sink in before continuing. Humanity will continue building our defenses, and we will continue to grow stronger. The species that stand with us will share in that strength. The species that stand against us will find that we have long memories. Daniel nodded and turned back to Zolmith for the final time. We are done here. High Speaker, humanity has nothing more to say to this council. When you are ready to speak to us as equals, you know where to find us. He turned and walked toward the exit, Lavra and the human delegation following. And this time, no one called out taunts or mockery. This time, the silence was heavy with something the council had never felt toward humanity before: respect, and perhaps a little fear. In the weeks that followed, delegations from 12 different species arrived on Earth, seeking the alliance that humanity had offered, and Secretary General Michelle Torres welcomed each one personally. The Valari, a peaceful species whose world had been threatened by the Vex centuries ago, brought agricultural technology that could feed billions to Catherine. Brilliant engineers who had been denied council membership for their unconventional methods offered to help rebuild humanity's shattered fleet. The Morvani, ancient scholars whose libraries contained knowledge lost to the rest of the galaxy, proposed an exchange of ideas and culture, and many others came, drawn by humanity's example. Inspired by the courage of a species that had refused to accept extinction, Admiral Lara Kim oversaw the construction of new shipyards in orbit around Earth and Mars, designing vessels that incorporated the best of human innovation and alien knowledge. And she made sure that a prominent place in every ship's memorial hall was reserved for Captain Nathan Cole and the crew of the Endurance on the first anniversary of the Battle of Mars. A monument was unveiled in Geneva, a towering sculpture of a human hand reaching toward the stars. And at its base were carved the names of every man and woman who had given their lives to save their world secretary. General Michelle Torres spoke at the dedication ceremony. Her words broadcast to every human settlement across the solar system. We stand here today because ordinary people did extraordinary things when the galaxy told them it was impossible, she said. We stand here because we refuse to accept that our story was over, and we stand here as a warning to anyone who might threaten our world in the future. She looked up at the monument, at the hand reaching toward the infinite darkness above. Humanity asked for help once, and we were denied. We will never ask again from this day forward. We are the help. We are the shield for those who cannot defend themselves, the sword for those who cannot fight back. We are what Earth has always been, the home of a species that does not know how to give up. Far above, in the cold reaches of space, the first ships of humanity's new fleet patrolled the borders of their growing alliance, watching the stars for threats both known and unknown, and deeper still. In the darkness between galaxies, the scattered remnants of the Vex swarm drifted and regrouped, their hive minds slowly rebuilding, their hunger undiminished. They would return someday, as all nightmares do, but humanity would be ready, and this time they would not be alone.